Exactly 11:30.
Okay, so hello everybody. This is the SOT session on the wrath of the elements, and we are live now. Welcome to this session. And this is for securing a climate safe future. This is the discussion that we will be having. I've got a great panel with me, and I would like to introduce my panelists. And before doing that, I would like to state that, the introduction is so impressive and long that probably, one day I would like to do a session which is based only on the introduction of these wonderful people that I have. So I will just have to be skimming over. I'll just be introducing a little bit about them. So we have with us Marnix van Holland. And, he started his career in the industries, running a youth hub and setting up various business initiatives. Interestingly, which he tells us, most of them failed miserably. So congratulations on gathering a lot of experience, because failure is a great teacher. So, and he's worked as a diplomat at the Malaysian embassy in Malaysia shortly. Then he joined the international NGO HIWAS, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, and that is he's an expert on entrepreneurship ecosystems, and he supports the global south where we all are and where we are trying to make our voices, resonate and tell the people, especially in the context of climate change, that, hey, whatever you're doing is impacting us more than anybody else. So you have to listen to what we have to say. And the another interesting thing about him is that he is passionate about development and empowerment, but he talks just as excitedly about his love for food, chess, crypto, and punk rock. So we've got the right person here to talk about the future, because I think all the people who are of this constituency are the ones who are going to be impacted and are the ones who may probably will be taking those steps we are looking at for solutions. Then I have with me Rab Nawaz, who is a senior director programs of WWF Pakistan. He also has a very, very interesting history, which again, deserves a whole different segment on its own. But I'll have to cut it short and focus on his involvement here in Pakistan. He's originally from the UK. And so I think he's a double Pakistani. I think after 5 or 10 years, Rafi, is it that we naturalize citizens? So he's been here long enough to get the double citizenship. And he has been working with the WWF Pakistan. He is since 1999. And initially, he was working in the Himalayan region. Then he was heading the Indus for All program. And I think anybody who needs to know what's going on in the area of species conservation and, the human and species interaction, human and non-human interaction, Rab Nawaz has been the go-to person for us. Then we have, I have with me Ahmed Chabar, who's from Karachi. He is a physicist and engineer by education, but he is our garbage man. So in Karachi, he started, it was a small startup about collecting trash or managing trash, which has now grown. And I'm very happy that he belongs to my city, because my city has also received a kind of a pejorative of I belong to Karachi, and the Karachi waste management problem is a mega problem. And he has also become more vested into the environment and climate change and the the urban ecosystem, which is being degraded because of the bad management, that he's also now started becoming an advocate. And not only is he part of the several initiatives that are there for climate advocacy, he has also taken out a magazine which is called the Environment, and there he takes up these topics, talks to people, brings awareness. Rafi Alam, he is he's an environmental lawyer. He is a lawyer actually, first and foremost. So obviously, it's not just environment that he takes up, but he's an environmental, I would say, advocate, pun intended, because of his profession. but advocate in every sense of the word, because he talks about environment, he teaches environment, he teaches people how environment needs to be dealt with and how we need to actually, that there are different lacunas, the laws, what laws are there, what laws are not there, which are the laws that are working, which are not working. So there are so many aspects to the kind of work that Rafe does, and he's also an activist, not just an advocate. And probably, you will see him at climate marches, you will see him speaking truth to the power, which is something very, very important, and not very many people do it, and he does it, in his very cool and calm way. And he holds up a mirror to people, that this is what needs to be done, and it isn't being done, and he doesn't really mince his words. So thank you, Rafe, for all that you do. We do have another panelist, Mr. Waqar Ahmed. He's not here right now, so as soon as he joins, I will introduce him as well. And I would just like to throw open the discussion. And I know that right now, sort of everybody and their aunt is working and talking about the COP26 that is still ongoing in Glasgow. And there was a lot of, hope that was attached to it, except for people who have turned skeptics now, having seen how these COPs pan out. But the main reason for that hope was because there are certain commitments that countries need to make, which were articulated very well during the Paris COP and the agreement and okay, so I'll just complete my sentence and then I'll introduce Waqar, who's joined us. So welcome, Waqar. So this is something that we need to actually talk about. That do we now just wait for something to come out of COP26, something that the world has been asking for, not just hoping for, because hope really isn't a strategy. We need to move beyond that. And we don't really see that the kind of solutions that were, the benchmarks that were set in Paris, they are being met, and whether the countries who everybody knows are the cause of the problem are also willing to become a part of the solution. So that is something, if we keep talking about that, then probably there are many other things that we need to focus closer to home, or if Marnix can, give us apples to apples comparisons, because he's worked in different regions, and Rabnawaz has also, because of the global footprint of his organization, could be able to tell us these examples. So do we focus now on those and leave the COP and the negotiations and the outcome for the moment? Because what will happen will happen. I mean, there's nothing that we talking about it over here will be able to influence. And before we move ahead, and I would like, all the other panelists to answer this question, I would like to introduce Waqar Ahmed, who is the Head of Corporate Affairs and Sustainability at Nestle Pakistan and Afghanistan. And he's responsible for leading the institutional networking and multi-stakeholder engagement policy for business advocacy with the government, etc. And the reason why we have Waqar over here is that it's very easy when we are trying to look for solutions to finger point at these big corporations, because we do see them as extractive of natural resources. But then what is the kind of responsibility has that element now seeped into the business function of such large organizations, because they are there across the world. Nestle is a global company as well. And I am not really talking here of the CSR, because CSR is something else. CSR is a part of your profits going into the society, or even if it has moved away from CSR to CSV, that creating shared values, which many of the companies have moved to. But it is about the way business is being done. It is the way about the materials are being sourced, and it is the way about the impact and the is being, the impact on the environment. So we would like Waqar, to answer those kind of questions. We wouldn't like to put you in the spot because you're not the only company that does this, but definitely, we would like answers because you wear the sustainability hat of your company. So back to the first question: do we leave the COP behind? And do we talk of other things? And when we say other things, if you can quickly, from the top of your head, list down maybe 5 each, the topics that you would like to bring to the table, and see a little bit more conversation on those, because you feel that those are the ones that are impacting the world, and then closer home, Pakistan. So Manex, would you like to give us a global picture that you think that there are topics which are not really covered under the COP negotiations about emissions, but there are things that we need to talk about?
Yes, thank you. Thank you also for the really introduction. I do hear a little bit of an echo of myself. It's gone. Thank you. Well, something sparked something in my brain when you said whatever we discuss here does not impact the COP, and in practice that is correct, right? What we say here will not reach the people in Glasgow in the upcoming days. They still have their second week ahead of them. However, I do believe that even the smallest things matter. Like T.S. Eliot said, not with a bang, but with a whimper. The butterfly effect. Small things do really, really matter. And it was something that also came up in our WhatsApp chat today, where I feel that contribution on a small level, it really matters in the long run. But also there are certain rules and regulations, a playing field, so to speak, that are set by governments. There's a certain complementarity that everybody has to play. You have the government, you have the private sector, you have ordinary people. And I do feel that now you've seen a lot of push from I would say, just people like everybody else. You see that also with the Fridays for Future marches, young people going out on the streets and actually voicing their opinion, which does impact political decision making, which does impact also what private sector does, what we can buy, how we buy it, where we buy it, etc. And it also connects to a larger understanding. All of these things, they do matter. And it's like baking a big cake. You don't solve a problem by adding more eggs. You need the eggs, the flour, the milk. You need all the components to bake that cake. Or maybe a tasty curry would be a better comparison. And what is not being discussed at the COP and what hasn't been discussed at the COPs for a long time are the most painful components. So it's about the financing of fossil fuels. That is a topic, but not really discussed about. And if you look at what happened in Paris, they made some nice agreements, but not all of them are legally binding. And I think that is a big problem of the COP. And as that process continues and is still very, very important, there is a lot we can do on the smaller scale, in your own region, city-wise. And things can also move a lot quicker within your own environment than in the concept of nation states.
Thank you. So that is exactly what I meant. That, I mean, of this COP, the negotiations may not be impacted by the kind of discussion we are having. So that let's focus on the things that get left behind, because we are aiming something for something so high that the other things, they just fall below the radar. So Rabnawaz, in the context of the pandemic, I know that the connection has been, well, maybe disproven. But the topic about species, the human and species interaction, came up in the context of the zoonotic diseases. And has there been an understanding that there is such a thing? And when we, the way we deal with the other species on the planet, we may be calling for their doom and in turn our doom, or is that conversation still not at that level of understanding?
So I think that if you, again, going back to COP26 and climate change, I mean, climate is no longer a discussion about carbon, and it's no longer a discussion about the 1.5 or 2 degree increase. It's about everything now. Climate is about biodiversity. Climate is about social justice or injustice, whichever you look at it. I mean, we have come a long way. I think there's a growing recognition. And I think COP26 posed a big challenge to the world. For that reason, we're coming out of a pandemic, and there's a lot of discussion about whether COP26 would be face-to-face, A lot of even activists didn't want it to take place because there was foreseen to be very limited participation, and everybody's gone to COP. I think we're perhaps 6 people here, the only ones who haven't gone to Glasgow. So yeah, coming to species, of course, again, that's a kind of ecological question, but it is linked to climate change, of course, and people fail to realise, and partially because of, I think, poor science as well, that the impact it's going to have, the impact that climate is going to have on species, and that in turn is going to have on us, is kind of still largely an undiscussed issue. We hear about it, but we always kind of hope there's going to be a technology to replace that. And who knows, maybe it will. I saw the other day someone had come up with a mechanical bee who could actually pollinate fruits and trees. I mean, it's really coming ahead. But you're never gonna fill that gap. I mean, nature's taken millions of years to be formed, and you can try to take shortcuts. It's never going to work. And I think the thing which now is being picked up, and the thing I would definitely like, I think, to raise here as a discussion, which is also very relevant to Pakistan, is food security. We rely on nature in so many ways for our food systems. We don't realize how much of the process is involved in getting a glass of milk on our table, getting a chapati on our plate. It's a very fragile system, and if any of these kind of components are removed due to climate change or due to our stability, the impact is going to be much more than any cyclone or flood or any other climatic disaster. It's going to be a pandemic times 10. So I think that's something which we really need to start talking about. Stop looking for technology to. I mean, we need the technology, but we need to really understand and really acknowledge how much it can potentially impact our food systems.
So I mean, you're saying yes, technology is also needed to safeguard the existing systems that we have, especially in the context of food security. And yes, I know that I wanted to ask a lot of governance and justice and law questions from Rafe, but Ahmed, I'll just come to you in a while, but very, very closely linked, and in fact they are one and the same thing, is the question of water security. And when we talk of water security, that is also, again, not just a climate issue, that's a justice issue, that's an equity issue, that's also a management issue. Because yes, we who do have these reports, and suddenly everybody gets into that alarmist mode that we are going to run dry, but that who is going to run dry? It's the question of haves and have-nots, and it's only the nots who will have-nots for whom the economy will be running dry, or is it going to be, an equal impact? And how do we, ensure that the most vulnerable are inured to those kind of shocks, Rafe?
Thank you, Afia. And I will speak about the water crisis in a second. But I wanted to reflect first on the COP very briefly. The Conference of Parties is an annual meeting under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which was signed in 1992 with an objective to stabilize greenhouse gas emissions. Now, the truth is that since 1992, the Earth has produced more greenhouse gases than it had historically produced until 1992. In other words, the UNFCCC has demonstrably failed in its objective to stabilize greenhouse gases. People who have hope in COP fail to understand that the basic legal arrangement around it is a total failure. What we're missing in the discussion on the climate crisis is an appreciation of the drivers of the climate crisis, which are capitalism, consumerism, colonialism, patriarchy, and the fossil fuel economy. And unless we are addressing and tearing down Capitalism is a system of economics whereby you have unaccountable extraction of wealth and abuse of natural resources and human labor. It is through capitalism we get these anomalous results, such as 90 companies being responsible for 2/3 of historical greenhouse gas emissions. This incredibly small cabal of elite businessmen who have gambled the future of our civilization away can only be allowed if there is no accountability with the extraction of resources and the abuse of human labor. Colonialism has allowed countries like the G20 to produce 80% of the world's greenhouse gases by extracting the capital and the resources of poorer countries through historical misuse. Patriarchy, because women are not part of the decision making when it comes to mitigation and adaptation strategies, which cannot be successful unless they have a voice. Consumerism, because 10% of the global elite of this world consume over 50% of its resources. It is this small cabal that is destroying the world, and it is these systems that we have to attack. Speaking of the water crisis in Pakistan, when we're repeatedly told that we're going to run dry somehow by 2025, well, let's break that down just a little bit, because while we're being scared that water is finishing, let's for a second ask where that water is going and look at what climate justice looks like in Pakistan. We are told that 90% of the water in Pakistan is diverted for agricultural use. And within agriculture, it is well known that water is used for rice, sugar, cotton, and your major crops. Now, if you take a look at rice and cotton, you find that water is being used to produce products that will be exported out of Pakistan. And when you look at sugar, it's remarkable to find that there are 90 sugar mills in Pakistan, across which there are 24 ethanol plants that use the molasses of the sugar plants to produce ethanol. Did you know that 24 ethanol plants in Pakistan exported $420 million worth of ethanol out of Pakistan? So if we are running dry, why aren't we asking questions of the Rice Exporters Association of Pakistan or APTMA or the 90 billionaire sugar mill barons who are taking this water and leaving Pakistan dry? That's what climate justice looks like, and that's the language we need to have, which is homegrown, indigenous, and contextualized to Pakistan's problems.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then now, of course, I'll have to pose a difficult question, which may be difficult for you, Waqar, but that is a question that the world is asking. You know, the world is asking all the big companies, like Rafi has mentioned many, and of course, right now, especially in the context of COP, there's a lot of focus on the fuel extracting companies. But generally, any natural resource extracting company is now being looked at with a question mark. And the way they do business, the way they are able to sort of replenish the resources, are they doing that? Are they allowing the earth to heal? So these are the questions that are being asked. And again, this is also a question of who is benefiting. The benefit is not equitably distributed. So where does a company like yours come in? And does a company like yours, is it cognizant of these kind of questions now? You know, they are gaining their resonance across the world. So how do you view them?
Thank you very much, Afia, and thank you very much, everyone. So I think let's start with I think what's already been said here, that is after the Paris Agreement, which is very, very important. And that made realize many of the big, large corporates that they have to do something. And in the words of UN Secretary General, what he said, it is not enough to act, we must act now. And that is what Nestle is doing, because climate change won't wait and neither can we. This is the philosophy that we are following. And, like any individuals, companies also have a great responsibilities. And I think there's a lot of blame comes on these big corporates. But I would see in the recent years, many of the big corporates, including Nestle, they've been making large commitments, and they are making really an effort to make sure that they are part of this, part of solution rather a problem. And that shows, the way the commitment has been made. And there's a lot of pressure and a lot of the word commitment that I have used that was required by the companies. And similarly, when it comes to the commitment made by Nestle publicly is to get to net zero by 2050 and reducing our emission by 20% by 2025 and having them by 2030. And these are not just words. If I look at what Nestle Pakistan is doing, these are global commitments, but very quickly there's been, it's been, you can say, transmitting down to at the operational level of the companies in countries like Pakistan, where, it's actually not, demanded by the consumers. Is more driven by the self-commitment made by the companies. And we are doing that. And that was what requires us to do going forward. We have created our own baselines based on, for example, in our case, we have done our baseline of emission of 2018. And then this all commitment that I've shared with you by 2030, we have to come down to half what we are doing at the moment. So these kind of, I think, commitments are important, and on ground, there are a lot of things are done, and they're going to happen more. We just started our journey, but there's a very, very regressive journey, very, very strong commitments there. We are not shying away, we are not running away, and we have not been, even from our head offices, we are not given a choice. And at times, we are doing more than what even our the local competitors of many of these multinationals, what they're doing or what is even required by the government. So I think that's what the commitment is coming when it comes to climate change. And we are seeing it very holistically. As Rafi just talked about the water, water is a very interesting debate and very, very important debate for us. At times we are blamed a lot about the use of water, but then probably we are one of the most responsible players in the market when it comes to manufacturing and engaging our farmers, engaging our consumers, how to reduce use of water in our operation and to an end to consumer as well, and going into a value chain. So we see it's a very holistic issue. And that's how the commitment is coming in. And that's why we're seeing, starting from our own operation and going to our value chain and then going to the consumers. That's what we a responsibility, and in coming days we'll see the more things, more upfront coming in, even to our brands, rather only a corporate brand talking about it and doing certain actions. Individual brands, they will be more active in delivering on that. That's, I would say, the way we, and when I said it's not only about Nestle. There are a lot of other FMCGs that I work very closely with. They all have similar kind of commitments, and they're all trying to do the best possible in our own scenarios. And we are looking at very positively, and we see that these are the results that we have to deliver on.
Thank you, Waqar. And actually, there are so many different follow-up questions that are popping up in my head that I am not even just yet looking at. And in the positive, because there's a paucity of time, and each of these topics deserve their own, elaborate agendas on these discussion forums. But I would like to go to Ahmed Shabar. Like I mentioned about him, he just began a startup which promoted the idea of separating the trash and picking it up, and then he's gone on and become part of these activism circles. So Ahmed, now I know that it's not very easy to get traction, and Karachi is it's a megalopolis, and it's difficult, the magnitude of the problem. But do you see any kind of stakeholder building or any kind of interest on part of the government? Because ultimately, it is the state's responsibility to take care of the matters of, the waste management and providing the services like water, electricity, etc. So do you, from the time you started to now, which has been, 3 years since you started this work, have you seen an interest in, taking this forward from the people who are actually responsible for having done it in the first place?
Right. Can everybody hear me all right? Okay, perfect. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak over here, and thank you for your question. I started in 2016. I started my research and everything after coming back from the US. Registered the company in 2017, and of course, the COVID era saw, a huge difference in how the waste management industry worked and everything as well. Um, as far as before I get into your question, Rafe mentioned that patriarchy is a huge problem and everything as well in these conversations. And I just realized that within this panel, Afia, of course, is a moderator, but there is no female panelist that could actually, speak on that issue as well. So again, we need to be very active in that diversity and everything as well. Okay, so moving to the garbage waste management issue. In 2016, 2017, when I was registering the company, I was told that the Sin Solid Waste Management Board owned all the trash. So there was no point in registering a local, company. But I went ahead and did it anyway. And since then, I've been working, with various organizations, and slowly and steadily, there's an interest building up in private organizations as well, to start recycling with us or managing waste and so on and so forth. As far as a government interest is concerned, I feel like there is better interest in properly managing the waste, but going towards holistic solutions, I don't think they've been doing that thus far. Because there was recently a call for companies, to manage waste in various districts, and turned out that there weren't any local companies that were included, and there were very large, Western or European-based companies, and the minimum that they revenue generated by them, they wanted was $5 million, and then up to $20 million, and so on and so forth, and there wasn't any local thing. So in order to resolve that issue, I believe that, again, we've been talking about whether COP26 affects the local conversation or the local conversation affects COP26. I think we need a more holistic solution, looking at the ground realities. For example, within 2 to 3 months of starting Garbage Can, I realized that this was a much larger waste management thing was a much larger issue, and it was directly related to the environmental conversation as well. And it was also related to the circular economy and the linear economy concept too. And it was also related to the refugee crisis, for example. And I believe that unless we do not resolve the refugee crisis, that's that exists in our country, I don't think that we'll be able to solve the waste management issue, because the refugees from Afghanistan or from various other countries that are over here, they're not really given the opportunity to somehow work in the mainstream sector. So and garbage is one of those things that's readily available on the streets, and you don't really need a license or any proper framework to start picking it up. So that's the industry that they've entered. And considering that COVID put a lot of restaurants closed down, so there wasn't PET bottles or cans and everything readily available. So the industry became very cutthroat, with the scavengers dumpster diving and trying their best to extract as much resources or materials as they can. So until and unless you resolve the refugee crisis and create a holistic policy, I don't think that we'll be able to resolve the waste management issue. And towards that end, I don't really see any seriousness of the government, or whether federal or Sin Solid Waste. And as far as Nestle and other spaces are concerned, I was I visited a plastic PET bottle manufacturing company in Hatar, in KP, and the people over there mentioned that right now, I think post-consumer plastic waste, just PET bottles, is 180,000 tons. If I might be wrong, if I'd appreciate it if you could correct me, annually. And in the next 4 to 5 years, it's supposed to increase to 225,000 tons. So even though we're talking about reducing plastic waste and banning plastic, and moving towards a circular economy, the amount of plastic waste is actually going to increase. So and of course the amount of water extraction or beverages and everything, of course, like, is going to increase as well. So is like Nestle or other companies that do produce post-consumer waste and everything, are they really serious about this, like about the sustainability question? That's it.
So these are the byproducts. I mean, we spoke about the water consumption, but then yes, of course, the water is bottled into something and marketed in something else. So I'm very sorry, there's a very little time, and I'm going to take that very easy way out for that a moderator takes. That any last remarks, but that those last remarks, what is the way forward? Now, we've sort of we are trying to eat the elephant bit by bit. It's a huge problem. The other elephant that we do not speak about, the elephant in the room, is of course the population explosion, which impacts each and every aspect of our life: the waste generation, the species, the conflict with the species, the consumerism, and everything, and the equity and justice issues, especially the one issue that you mentioned, and you use the word refugees. And interestingly, it is the third generation of those people who were originally refugees, and we haven't yet decided why are we considering them as somebody from any other country. They were born here, even their parents were born here. So, as far as the legal aspect of that citizenship issue, that again is a human rights issue, that's a justice issue too. So we have so many things. So starting from you, Manix, what do you see as a way forward of taking those big ticket items, into consideration, but also not ignoring something that is under the radar so far?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. It's a very difficult one, right? Because we as a species have known about the impact of climate change for quite a while, at least the main contributors, and not that much has happened, right? Mm-hmm. So I do feel that education is a key component, and education also comes for those who are unaware. But I do see that although we consider people unaware, if they don't know the right words, they don't know the jargon, they don't know exactly the difference between 2 degrees or 1.5 degrees, but people do see things changing, right? Whether it's floods or droughts or rising water or just the temperature rising, etc. People do see that. I feel the educational component is massive, and I feel that the combination of all components of society that are at play, whether it's public sector, whether it's private sector, whether it's people on the ground, it's a complementary approach where all parts need to move. And I do understand that there are a lot of unknown knowns. We do know that it's going to change, but we don't know what that change is going to mean. We do focus a lot on the 1.5, 2 degrees to make sure that these massive droughts and floods do not appear. But what about how can we finance and how can we work with the new status quo? How does that look? All of these things, we need to have an open discussion, and we need to move forward in a way that actually takes care of those that are hit the hardest, because the discussion now is being held by people that are basically the main polluters. They decide about the lives of those they have impacted in a manner that I find disturbing to say the least. And you see this now also on a higher level, where they bring in one young person, like a token young person, and then they just smile and nod, and then they just go back to business as usual. Or they bring in an indigenous person, they let this person dress up in traditional clothing, while maybe this person does not even dress up like this in daily life. These things are disturbing because they try to change the narrative in a way to make it everybody's problem except theirs. And that's where things really, really need to change. But I do feel that together we can make that change. And there's on the small personal part, in your private decisions, But then there's also the pressure that you can put onto governments, the pressure that you can put on your educational system, the pressure that you can put on your next door neighbor, your community. All of these bits and pieces, they all come together, and they're all needed because the way I see life is that regardless of which border you're born in, which nation state, or regardless of culture, religion, shoe size, favorite color, or whatever you like to eat or drink, climate change also doesn't see race or nation states, right? It goes far beyond. And I think that as a people, if we move together, I think we can actually do something, but it's not moving fast enough with the current setup, and that needs to change. And I think some of these bits and pieces are now moving, whether it's protest, whether it's consumer push, but I think there's much more that we can do. And I think, yeah, time is sort of running out, but then also I do feel that some people go, well, time is running out, so let me just take it as it is. And that's not how change happens.
Thank you very much. And Ravnavaz, how do you see going forward on all these fronts?
So I think, population control is not, the global population is not really a huge climate issue. Mother Nature has a very good way of balancing things. And look at the pandemic. This is a very mild pandemic. And the Earth has resources. When the human population gets to a limit, it's going to crash, whether if there's climate change or not. I'm sorry to say that, but that's how we see populations work. It goes back to what I think two or three things. One goes back to what Rafi said about accountability. So two things. One is accountability is, as you said, a few companies, a few people have done this in the last 60, 70 years. We need to stop being politically correct. I think we're very nice to each other on a global scale, and it's getting us nowhere. The second thing is, and I look at the consumer and the producer thing. So in terms of consumers, I was listening to something on COP26 about how a famous footballer a few weeks ago there was some Coke bottles or Pepsi or whatever, I don't know to name them, I can't remember. They were blocking his view. He just swiped them off the table, and that's kind of soft drinks sales dropped by 50 million overnight. Consumers are very powerful, and they can really dictate and really influence the markets. And this is where we've had, I think, some of our biggest successes are targeting the corporates and the markets. Some are very responsible, many are not, but it is an economics business case, and they are the pinch point. If you talk about water, if you reach out to everybody whose product was produced by water, that would be the entire country. The entire globe. Jeans, food, everything. Look at the people who produce water or produce cotton, for example. There are hundreds and thousands, but there are few companies who actually manage it. So I think it's the economics of influencing that. And so I think getting into this mind of consumers, of the damage they're doing, and then finding those producers, finding those companies, there are leaders out there and champions. I think we need to work with them. We need to really sort out greenwashing because it's another big phenomenon going on. But I do believe there are solutions out there which are the win-win for everybody. If we can really get that to a scale where it matters, I think things will slowly kind of fall into place.
Thank you. So actually, what you are saying is that if companies have their eye on the triple bottom line, not just the profits, but also on the impact that they have on the environment, and then their processes change, and it may or may not be driven by consumer demand. I know Waqar mentioned that we are catering to the consumer demands to be better. Sometimes it is also about the compliances of the existing laws. Rafe, please correct me if I'm wrong, that not all companies have yet complied to whatever is already laid down. So first, I guess that would be the first step. And then, yes, there are companies which go beyond what the laws we have, but what internationally, maybe the benchmarking is above what we is our benchmark. So could that be it? But before I move to Rafe, Ahmed, about the kind of interest you say that it has grown, but the scale is too big, and there are legal issues also in getting the human resource involved in it to to take this process to another level. You are also involved in activism like Rafe is. You think that has made a dent? Do you think that has actually raised the consciousness of the people to demand better from the government?
Yes, I think I think that has impacted the conversation, and more and more people are starting to realize that the environment is very political as well. And the reason why I said like in a WhatsApp chat that like COP26 has failed to really like have an impact on low income countries or least developed economies and everything, because the conversation hasn't been as pervasive or hasn't been as inclusive. But more and more people are starting to realize that. Rafe talked about the water issue. The water issue was seen as like a very political issue, but not as an environmental issue. And turns out, like when I went to Balochistan, and turns out the Balochistan's crops were being ruined, or like one area's crops were being ruined because some minister wanted water like to be gone to the Jalmaksi or like the like other area. Or there's a conversation about seawater intrusion, but the like the locals are seeing it in real time that the crops are being destroyed. But we talk about seawater intrusion. That jargon isn't as pervasive, like as pervasive in the local context. So how do we get it there? And that's where like how do we get them included in the conversation? And that's how activism, that's where activism comes in. And it's not going to be me or Rafe or like the more privileged people that like have that conversation. We can be like the bridge, but we need to have the locals actually rise up. And that's what we're seeing with the climate march that's happening tomorrow as well. And I also disagree, I'm concerned that we've been borrowing a lot from the global north or the west, like even in terms of movements are concerned. We need local movements, and that's why I've been pushing for something called the Pakistan Mahauliyati Tahaffuz movement. That's I'm trying to lay the groundwork for it, and I'd love to have more conversations about that with Afia and Ahmed and Rafe and Rabnawaz and Bakar Ahmed Saab and everybody as well, because we really need to have that conversation. And and Rabnawaz also mentioned a term called greenwashing. So I'm gonna go back to the waste management thing because that's where my interest in I've worked at a nuclear reactor, so I've worked with nuclear waste a little bit as well. But that's where my interest in environmental issues and everything started. So your earlier question whether Sindh government was interested, I mean there aren't any scientific landfills. What we have right now, it's dumps. So
Yeah.
if we were to see an interest, we would see material recovery facilities or scientific landfills being developed, and they're really not that expensive, 14 to 15 million dollars, and you can have a pretty decent landfill. That's a cost that of a landfill that I saw in Los Angeles, in Orange County 2 years ago. So I mean, there's been a lot of money flowing in from places like World Bank and etc. And there've been a lot of talks about it, but there's been a lot of greenwashing going on as well. I mean, recycling itself is probably the largest greenwashing campaign or propaganda that we that started to promote that was started to promote plastics. That we can recycle it, so it's really great. But now it's become the need of the hour, because I mean, if we do not move towards the circular economy and we stay within the linear and the disposal economy, it's just going to keep ruining our planet more and more. So somebody asked how we can how we can prevent climate change by small acts in everyday life. I guess yeah, you can start recycling, I guess. But so we need to move. Like if we really want to become serious, we need local conversations, and we need to stop being politically correct, and start and stop greenwashing things, and really start getting into the difficult conversations.
Thank you. And Waqar, I mean, you spoke about the consumer, that you do listen to the consumer and you want to make things better. But living in a consumer society, you really think that that the same kind of consumerism we do, even if your processes improve, can that make a dent?
Certainly, I think the way I would like to answer it in two parts of it. One was raised by Ahmed on the plastics, and then we come back on plastics again is indirectly part of the climate change. So we can't separate it. So overall, I think it's a very collective action that we require from all the stakeholders, whether it's the government, whether it's consumers, whether it's the corporations. Everyone has a responsibility to play, and its size may differ, but everyone has a responsibility to play. So as a consumer, I have to do a lot of things. As a corporate where I work, we need to change the whole mantra, and the focus is coming up there. But also a lot of responsibility needs to come from the government. On plastic, I would say there's a new commitment coming up again from I see a lot of companies who are the part of various parts of the value chain, whether they are manufacturing plastics, whether they are manufacturing, these kind of packaging materials under the sustainable packaging areas, and the companies who are using those plastics in terms of the fall and taking it to consumers. For example, there's a lot of you talked about the plastic bottle, which is that is growing, but there's a lot of commitment by the company now. They are moving away from using the virgin plastics. So we have our own target by 2025. We have to go down by 30% on virgin plastic, which is a huge change, and which is required to be moving on using recycled materials. Now, very interestingly, a country like ours, till today, in fact, it took us 1 year with all the large corporates together, with some good NGOs, including WWF and many others, that we have approached Pakistan, PSQC, which is a quality standard authority, that companies are not allowed to use recycled materials in food packaging. So we, as an alliance of companies under CORE, which is collect and recycle, we have approached the government at the national level. We have done it very successfully in just probably 8 months' time. And now we have taken that new rule for packaging to the provincial government. Because, after 18 amendments, a lot of things are managed by provincial governments. So those kind of bottlenecks are also there for the companies as well. Even if they want to do it, there are certain bottlenecks that you have to cross. So we are doing it, step by step. And then a lot of good projects are coming in terms of, collecting those packaging materials and recycling them. For example, we are involved in Hunza in a very big way, where we are almost collecting everything what we are sending there. So as I just said, pilot, whatever is with the help of these Gilgit and Hunza Waste Management Authority. So we are helping them collect and then sending it back to the recyclers. And this is such a win-win solution. We by putting a very small effort, because that's the only place where the infrastructure is there. So there are some success stories as well. Coming on the climate change and consumers. So I think in Pakistan the challenge is there's a less drive from the consumers, and we have done studies where what you see the challenge, if you alone jump into it, so your competitor, which is at times now every multinational has a local competition. It's not a multinational versus multinational. So you see the local competitors are not doing enough. So by doing all these kind of positive things, you adding cost. So and you're still doing that, and you're trying to deliver upon that. But the challenge remains. You require a collective action from all different places. And for example, when I told you, we are reducing our emission, and we put up a target of by 2030 it will be half, and by going back 2025 it will be 20%. So we actually mapped out from where the emissions are generated within our Nestle value chain. And we found, yes, our factories are very, very efficient, but actually it is coming from our own farmers who are producing milk. So we are now working with our farmers with a lot of initiatives, and the 45% of the impact will be coming from our farmers, and that we are working together with them. We know we can't leave them alone. It's our value chain, is our issue. So if we are selling milk, it's our responsibility to our consumers that we act responsibly. We're making sure that the milk that is collected is done in a way that is create less and less emissions. So we are helping our farmer importing, a few of the, imported cows. We are in a very big way. We are planting trees on those farms from where these milk is, where the farmer is growing fodder for its animal. And then all kind of, the best practices when it comes to, use organic, fertilizers, all those kind of steps, whatever is possible. We've been trying to do small steps, and actually, these small steps help us reduce 50% of our emissions. And that's true for the whole Pakistan economy. If you look at, the actual emission which is coming out is from the agri side. And agri side, the largest contribution is coming from the animals, whether it's coming from the poo or whether it's coming from, by the farm production. So that's very, very important that companies look into their value chain. They actually need to map out from where the emissions are coming out and then address to that. Again, as I said, there are a lot of other things that can be related to it. Water is another issue. The same collective action is required there, and companies we are doing a lot on that. Whatever we could do, possibly again working with the farmers, because that's what the responsibility is, that you look into a value chain and address those challenges. So these are just two examples I just shared.
I'm sorry. Please complete your sentence.
No, just saying that these are few steps that we are taking, working very closely with our farmers and taking the responsibility that whatever we are producing, it is our responsibility till the end of the consumer.
Okay, so basically what you are saying is there should be a common yardstick, to judge the companies and the kind of actions that are asked of them. It's not just the multinationals that are going to be
absolutely
contribute. And while talking of animals, and I recently had the chance to visit the Karachi cattle colony, and I know the debate about emissions, etc., are centered around carbon, but there's methane, and there's a lot of methane that you are putting out in the air when you have these huge, livestock colonies. So I guess that also has to be taken into account. So, Rafe, coming to you, there are these words, yes, what Shabar has talked about, we need action. Then even Manik has said that we need to be cognizant of the kind of words that we use and whether those words make sense to the people that we are trying to, engage with. But we do hear of words like greenwashing and, lack of political will, etc. And a very important element, which Manik also pointed out too, is of education. So where do you see the education being mainstreamed? Are we looking at schools? You've got 2.5 crore people, children who are out of school, so they are being impacted and they are impacting. So when we say education, how do you look at it? It's not just about the laws and it's not just about the compliances or the marches. What kind of education and what will bring that education across the society?
Thank you, Afia, for that question, and allow me to ignore it. I want to start by saying that we've known about climate change for over 150 years, and I want to acknowledge Eunice Foote, a female researcher who published an essay in 1856 in the American Association for the Advancement of Sciences journal that was published that year, who first linked the burning of or CO2 with temperature increase. It's not just a 20th century phenomenon, it's 150 years and discovered by a woman. I think people who ask questions about what steps we can take don't realize how bad the climate crisis is. We're at 1 degree slightly warmer than pre-industrial levels, and we've seen forest fires in the Arctic. The oceans are acidifying, coral reefs are dying. We're in the 6th extinction event, and there are plastics in our bodies. And I can't begin to tell you the devastation that just between 1.5 degrees and 2 degrees of warming will cause. The 5th IPCC estimated that the difference between 1.5 and 2 degrees will be 150 million lives, lost mostly in Asian and African cities on account of air pollution associated with greenhouse gases. That's 4 times the number of people who were killed in fighting in World War I and World War II put together. And we are looking at a 2-degree increase by towards the end of this century unless drastic steps are taken. On an individual level, there's not much you can do unless, of course, you want to stop eating red meat, driving a car, taking tourism. Those are things you could do. But what we need is massive, massive overhauls of our energy systems and our transport systems and our agriculture systems, which are going to upset the status quo. There have to be unprecedented, this is what the United Nations Secretary General said, unprecedented changes in economies and society if we are to meet the goals of Paris or even indeed Kyoto. I think it's very important in the South Asian context to be able to vocalize or have a discourse on climate justice. We have in the person, for example, of Greta Thunberg, such a remarkably powerful message of the climate crisis, but essentially from the point of view of the global north. Yeah. Most of the people who are impacted by climate change are in the global south. And it's not population that is a driver of climate change. It is inequity and the 10% of the global elite consuming most of the resources that are to blame. You can't blame the poor people of the world for the excesses of the rich. That's borderline racism and discrimination. But what we do need to do is put our ears to the ground and listen to what climate activists from the global south are saying. Their articulation of climate problems may not include fossil fuel companies, but they are as important to be heard if we are to have some sort of sustained fight against the climate crisis.
So this is it, you see, because it's the people who are being impacted are not the ones who are creating the problem. And that conversation needs to happen a lot more than it has happened up till now. And I think the way Rafe opened it and he gave this historical context of the COPs and how little effect they've had. So I'm not going to say that the COPs are not good, because there's a lot of, on the sidelines, there's a lot of research happening. There's a lot of new findings that come out. But the point is that COP is a negotiating platform, and those negotiations are what are supposed to be implemented and to be, they need to be binding. They're not. And maybe that is why, the complete failure that Rafe just pointed out too. And the alarm bells that Rabnawaz pointed out with, our food system, when that collapses, it's going to be very, very difficult to sort of, put that back together. And everything depends on that. This is a topic that can have no end. I have a very late flight. I would love to just keep carrying on this conversation with all of you. But thank you.
One comment. I just want to make one very quick comment that we need to realize that it's very political. As you said, you mentioned that COP is a negotiation, right? So how do you translate the food issue to the local farmer or the water issue to the local? And as there's the Green New Deal, like somewhere else, we need a Pakistani or South Asian context to it as well. So we need.
I think it's a South Asian context we need to look at. Yes, I agree, because you see, these are transnational problems. It's not as if we'll be able to contain the air quality, the kind of air we have, or the water issues. So it has to be seen in at least in a regional level, if not at a global right now. So I would like to once again thank all of you very much for your time, for your input, for the insights. And I would like to thank Beacon House School of Tomorrow, the event that they put together, which give us so much food for thought. And I'd like to say thank you to the organizers, to my panelists, and to everybody who's been watching this. And I hope, we'll be able to see some comments under this, and maybe, those comments also will provoke some kind of conversation and some kind of an action that they can point to, that we can take. So goodbye, everybody. Have a nice day. Bye.